in aeronautics and astronautics and a PhD in nuclear engineering. He calls those who promote the idea of catastrophic man-made climate change anti-human because they often overlook the plight of the world's poor.
CO2, you're saying, is not something we should be that concerned about.
The anti-humanists had a stronger argument in the 70s because a global cooling trend would have been harmful. Global cooling shortens the growing season. It would have limited food production and so forth. Warming trends are always good for humanity, good for the biosphere. They lengthen the growing season. They increase net rainfall worldwide. And CO2-driven global warming is the best of all because it not only lengthens the growing season and increases rainfall, and incidentally makes the world's climate more mild, okay, it accelerates plant growth. CO2 is the essential limiting ingredient for plant growth. We've had, since 1958, we have had photographs of the Earth taken from orbit. And what they show is over this period of time, during which time the world's atmospheric CO2 concentration did increase by 19%, the rate of plant growth on Earth increased by 15%. Okay, I'm not talking here about agricultural plants. Those have done much better because of the advance of agricultural technology. I'm talking about wild plants, jungles, forests, grasslands. These have grown faster because CO2 is more plentiful. And there's no doubt about the causality here because you can reproduce this experiment in the lab, and people have done so. If you increase the CO2 concentration, plants are going to grow faster. What we're doing is we're making the Earth a more fertile world. And yet the anti-humanists say, well, this is horrible. You must put a stop to it. If CO2 levels in the atmosphere were decreasing as a result of human activity, then they would have a case. But in fact, we're increasing it. We're making the world more fertile. And yet they still say it's wrong.
I know the science, but not many people look at the theological aspects of this. Would we think that an architect who designed a building so that if you leaned on a wall, all of the structure of that building would magnify the stress created by your leaning on that wall so that the building collapsed? Would we think that that architect was brilliant? No, we'd think he was a fool, right? Global warming alarmism says that doubling CO2 concentration in the atmosphere could lead to catastrophic warming. Now, when you talk about doubling CO2 concentration in the atmosphere, that sounds pretty significant. Doubling, wow, twice as much, you know? But the reality is you're doubling it from 27 thousandths of 1% to 54 thousandths of 1%. Who in his right mind thinks that taking CO2 from 24 thousandths of a percent to 54 thousandths of a percent is going to cause climate catastrophe? Only somebody who does not believe that an infinite God designed, an omnipotent God created, and a faithful God sustains the climate system.
What people are really overlooking here, and this is where the true environmentalists are on the wrong side of this issue, and they don't even know it, because the media is not telling them both sides of this issue. Carbon dioxide is the staff of life. We all learned in the 3rd grade that's what plants eat. Plants eat carbon dioxide. The more carbon dioxide you feed them, the more robustly they grow.
Would it be accurate to say if you switch to a bigger truck or a bigger van, you'd be helping the environment more than if you switch to a Prius?
As long as they can clean up all the other bad things that come out of the exhaust, there's nothing wrong with putting CO2 in the atmosphere.
Despite of the fact that the empirical evidence shows that carbon dioxide is not a pollutant that's causing catastrophic climate change, Green still insists that it is. But one must wonder why.
None of this makes sense unless you realize that what they are trying to do is, first of all, to wreck the West and shut it down from within by environmental regulation in a manner that they couldn't do by the communism of the Soviet Union.
Known as the High Priest of Climate Skepticism, Lord Christopher Monckton was my next interview.
So there's an enormous funding bias in science caused by the fact that science is what we economists call a monopsony.
Well, Christopher Monckton is regarded as one of the world's leading skeptics on the issue.
He is extremely disliked by the global climate change community. In fact, he's been kicked out of a UN conference in Doha, and an Austrian professor actually wanted him executed for daring to question the legitimacy of climate science.
The warming must be happening. Maybe it's going and hiding in the sea, and it's going to come out over that parapet and say, boo, here we are, in a few years' time. They have clambered on to this global warming bandwagon just at the moment when all the wheels have fallen off. So they're going nowhere with it. And everybody can see, except themselves, that they're going nowhere with it. The West is deeply resented, even by many of its own citizens, because of its cheerfulness, its success, its prosperity, its freedom, and its democracy. And those who like to see themselves as a part of a wiser governing class that knows better than we do how we ought to live our lives hate the fact that the cheerful chaos of democracy leads to such extraordinary prosperity. They hate it, they resent it bitterly, they want to stop it. They have discovered the environment as the way to stop this.
In the 1970s, there was a global cooling going on, natural global cooling. And the anti-humanists then said, look, there's global cooling. It's endangering us with a new ice age. It's being caused by industry, which is being driven by population growth and economic growth. Okay, they're out of control. They got to be put under control, put us in control. Then in the 80s, the climate trend turned around, it started to warm, and they said, look, there's global warming, it's being driven by industry, which is being driven by population growth and economic growth. They're out of control, they got to be put under control, put us in control. Okay, the problem changes, the solution is always the same. Put them in control. Global warming, the whole issue is not about weather, it's about power.
The main cause of regulation now is the excuse that we must either protect the environment or save the planet from climate change. This is now the main source of regulation worldwide, particularly in Western countries. Of course, China is not regulating itself, so it can't build fossil-fueled power stations as we are in Britain. In Britain, this year, we are closing 6 of Britain's largest power stations because they're powered by coal and they're a slightly old-fashioned design. Our European masters, whom we do not elect, it's a dictatorship, have ordered us to close those power stations. The British government, which no longer stands up for the British people, is going to close them. It has known for several years it was going to have to close them. It has made absolutely no provision to replace the electricity from those power stations with nuclear power or new coal-fired or gas-fired power stations.
So what's going to happen?
The lights will go out.
Environmental regulation can, like laws that restrict the use of carbon, cause freedom and prosperity to be reduced. When that happens, as I learned, life becomes more difficult for people all around the world. And it's not just about lights going out. This is a life and death issue.
Tell me about this chart here that you showed me when we walked in.
Everything we use is either made of carbon or made with carbon. Everything. This is per person income, average global income, okay, in dollars, 2010 dollars, adjusted for inflation, from 1800 to today. Graphed, however, against carbon consumption. This is one of the greatest stories ever told. This is humanity's escape from poverty. Billions of people escaping from poverty, enabled by increasing carbon consumption. And now you have people come along and say, we have to stop this. We want to stop the increase in carbon consumption. We want to stop this line from keep going up, which is exactly what it needs to do. Because while $9,000 a year average income is a great achievement, it's hardly enough. Okay, it's 1/5 of the average in the United States today, and we still have some poverty here. And half the world is below the average. This thing needs to go forward. And for someone to say, no, we want to stop it. We're fine as we are. Let the rest of them starve. We don't care. Or better yet, let's impose the Kyoto Treaty and reduce carbon consumption back to what it was in 1990, okay, when the world per capita income was $5,000 a year. Okay, that was fine. That's good enough for us. This is the most reactionary, cruel, brutal, heartless policy that anyone could possibly propose. Okay, the moral imperative of our generation is to continue this march forward. This thing's a miracle, and this is what the Greens want to stop.
American biofuels policy is estimated to cost about 192,000 excess premature deaths every year in developing countries. Our policy of not giving foreign aid to countries that use DDT in fighting malaria results in perhaps 1 to 2 million excess malaria deaths every year in developing countries.
On a global scale, there are people around the world who do in fact lose their lives because of green laws and environmentalism. Even in America, the green movement continues to cause many people to lose their jobs and their livelihoods. Living in Montana has exposed me to many environmental laws related to land use or endangered species that failed to provide solutions to the problems they were created to solve. One example of this is the destruction of the timber communities in the northwestern United States.
We had mining, we had wood processing facilities, and it was a vibrant economy. I mean, it was a great place to grow a family. And now, since the environmentalists came to help us and the federal government came to help us, things have gone to hell in a handbasket.
The destruction of just the wood products industry alone in Montana has probably resulted in something on the order of a loss of 50,000 jobs in Montana. And that is a huge impact on a state that has 900,000 people in it.
Drug abuse is on the rise, elder abuse, spousal abuse, alcohol abuse.
Has it always been this way in this area?
No, it hasn't. You used to have 10 mills, churches, schools, people lived and worked, their children got jobs. There used to be 22 mills in Siskiyou County.
Now what happened?
The green movement, the spotted owl happened. The green movement used the spotted owl to reduce logging to almost zero.
They were thriving timber communities, and it was all national forest lands. When they came in with the spotted owl and just really tied up and hamstrung the whole industry, and I've just watched in 20 years those communities just die. It's sad.
Lumber was the #1 industry in Humboldt County, and now it's marijuana. Groups like Earth First and Greenpeace, they send up kids, you know, and they chain themselves to the logging trucks and they sit in the trees.
They have made our environment worse. Our socioeconomic environment is absolute disaster. Talk to the jailer at the Lincoln County jailhouse and she'll tell you what's causing this. It's lack of employment.
In the case of these communities, the biggest factor determining the quality of life was the timber industry, which was shut down by environmentalists who claimed that logging was threatening the habitat of northern spotted owls, a bird of much controversy over the last few decades.
We have all the trees in the world. We have millions upon millions of acres of trees. The environmentalists have already shut that down over an owl, by the way. And if they were correct, well, we should have owls coming out of our ears, right? But the owl population continues to crash in spite of the fact that there is no logging anymore. Well, if it wasn't logging that killed the owl, what was it?
The regulation that comes out to protect owls protects their habitat to the point of trying to densify everything beyond what it could have been. So you're trying to prevent any kind of disturbance in the upland. Well, that's not reality for this ecosystem.
He's got a 6-foot wingspan. He needs to be able to fly to the forest floor to eat the only food he eats, a wood rat, a dusty-footed wood rat, a pack rat. Well, now there are so many trees, the owl can't reach the forest floor.